The winter of 1875 had been merciless on the Texas plains. Morgan Caldwell pulled his worn leather coat tighter as he trudged through the ankle-deep snow, the bitter wind cutting through him like a knife. His ranch, 20 miles outside of Laredo, was as isolated as the man himself, both weathered by time and circumstance, both surviving rather than living. Morgan had just finished mending the eastern fence line when he spotted something unusual against the white landscape. A small, dark shape huddled beneath a gnarled mesquite tree. At first, he thought it might be an injured animal, perhaps a wolf cub separated from its pack. But as he approached, the shape took human form, and Morgan's heart seized in his chest. A child. An Indian child. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, her small body wrapped in a threadbare blanket dusted with snow. Her eyes, dark as obsidian, watched him warily as he approached, neither pleading nor afraid, just empty, like someone who expected nothing from the world. "Hello there," Morgan said softly, crouching down several feet away. The girl didn't respond, didn't move. Only the slight rise and fall of her chest confirmed she was alive. "Are you hurt?" Still no response. Morgan noticed something pinned to her blanket, a folded piece of paper yellowed and creased. With careful movements, trying not to frighten the child, he reached forward and unpinned it. Inside, written in a shaky hand, were 6 words that would change his life forever. "I was loved once too." Morgan looked up at the endless expanse of snow-covered plains. No tracks, no signs of whoever had left her here. Just a child abandoned in the cold with those haunting words. "I can't leave you out here," he muttered, more to himself than to her. The temperature would drop below freezing once night fell. No one could survive that, especially not a child. When he reached toward her, she flinched but didn't run. Morgan moved slowly, telegraphing his intentions as he would with a spooked horse. "I'm going to take you somewhere warm. That's all." He lifted her, surprised by how little she weighed. She remained rigid in his arms, neither accepting nor rejecting his help, a soul suspended between trust and fear. As Morgan carried her back toward his ranch house, the girl's eyes remained fixed on the horizon, as though watching for someone who wasn't coming back. The 2-room cabin that Morgan called home was sparse but warm. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the wooden walls. Morgan set the girl down on a chair near the fire and busied himself with heating some broth he'd made the day before. "You hungry?" he asked, offering her a steaming cup. The girl stared at it suspiciously. Morgan took a sip first, then offered it again. This time she accepted, small hands wrapping around the warmth of the cup. As night fell across the Texas plains, Morgan prepared a makeshift bed on the floor near the fire, giving the girl his only blanket. He would sleep in his chair. It wouldn't be the first time. "You can stay until morning," he told her. "Then we'll figure something out." The girl watched him with those impenetrable eyes before curling up on the blanket, facing the fire. Morgan settled into his chair, the mysterious note still clutched in his hand. "I was loved once too." 5 simple words and a world of meaning. Morgan tucked the note into his shirt pocket, close to his heart, where another note, one he'd received 15 years ago, also rested. As sleep claimed him, Morgan wondered if this child's arrival was mere chance or something more. A cruel reminder of his past, or perhaps, though he dared not consider it, a chance for redemption. Outside, the Texas wind howled like a wounded animal, and snow continued to fall, covering any tracks that might have led to answers. Days turned into weeks, and the girl remained. Morgan had ridden into town once, asking if anyone knew of a missing Apache child. The responses ranged from indifference to thinly veiled hostility. "Probably from one of those bands raiding up north," Sheriff Wallace had suggested, spitting tobacco juice into a brass spittoon. "Best turn her over to the Army. They'll know what to do with her." Morgan had seen what the Army did with Indian children, shipped them off to government schools, stripped them of their language, their customs, their names. He remembered the hollow-eyed Apache men he'd encountered years ago at Fort Stockton, men who'd surrendered only to save their families from starvation. "I'll keep looking," Morgan had replied, ignoring the sheriff's raised eyebrow. Now, a month after finding her, the girl still hadn't spoken a word. Morgan had taken to calling her Wren, small, quiet, watchful. She followed him around the ranch, observing his daily routines with solemn attention. When he repaired fences, she handed him nails. When he tended the horses, she stood just outside the stall, watching with careful eyes. It was a morning in late February when Morgan discovered her secret. He'd awoken before dawn, as was his habit, only to find Wren's blanket empty. Panic gripped him until he spotted her through the window, kneeling in the dirt near the corral. The first rays of sunlight illuminated her small form as she traced patterns in the earth with a stick. Morgan approached quietly, not wanting to startle her. As he drew closer, he recognized what she was drawing: figures, symbols, words perhaps in her native language. Wren? She didn't look up, continuing to draw with focused intensity. Morgan knelt beside her, watching as complex patterns emerged from her stick's movements. "Is this your language?" he asked gently. For the first time since he'd found her, Wren met his eyes directly. Then, in a voice so soft he almost missed it, she spoke. "My mother taught me. Before." The words hung in the crisp morning air, her first gift to him. "Before what, Wren?" Morgan asked, his heart hammering. Her eyes clouded. "Before the soldiers came." The weight of those 4 words settled over them both. Morgan had suspected as much. Raids on Apache camps had intensified in recent months as settlers pushed further west. "What happened to your mother?" Wren's stick paused in the dirt. "They took her away, many days walking. She gave me to an old woman who was kind, said to hide me." Her English was halting but clear. "The old woman brought me here, said a good man lived here. She was sick, very sick." Morgan understood now. The old woman must have left Wren near his property, perhaps intending to approach his house, but succumbing to illness before she could. "And the note?" he asked. Wren touched her chest where the note had been pinned. "My mother's words, for whoever found me. I was loved once, too." A mother's plea to a stranger, asking them to love her child as she had been loved. "What's your real name, Wren?" Morgan asked softly. "Nashota," she replied. "It means twin. Do you have a twin, Nashota?" She shook her head. "My mother said I have 2 spirits, Apache and white." Morgan's breath caught. "Your father was white?" Nashota nodded, continuing her drawing in the dirt. "Soldier, kind one. He loved my mother." Her stick drew a straight line through her patterns. "Other soldiers killed him." The familiar ache in Morgan's chest intensified. He understood mixed heritage and its burdens all too well. "My grandmother was Cherokee," he admitted, words he'd spoken to no one in Laredo. "My father hid it, said it would make life easier." Nashota looked up at him with new understanding, a tentative connection forming between them. "The old woman was right," she said simply. "You are a good man." Morgan's throat tightened. He wasn't sure about that, not with the weight of his past still pressing down on him. But in that moment, with this child looking at him as though he might actually be worthy of trust, he desperately wanted to be. "I'll protect you, Nashota," he promised, "for as long as you need." As the sun rose higher over the Texas landscape, casting long shadows across Nashota's dirt drawings, Morgan realized something had shifted between them. The girl had given him her truth, her name, her story, gifts more precious than gold in this harsh land where honesty rarely survived. That evening, after they'd shared a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Morgan retrieved a small wooden box from beneath his bed. It contained the few personal items he'd carried with him across 15 years of wandering: a tarnished pocket watch, a faded daguerreotype, and a folded letter similar to the one Nashota had carried. "I was loved once, too," Morgan said quietly, showing her the letter. "My wife, Sarah. She wrote this before she died." Nashota touched the yellowed paper with gentle fingers. "What happened?" Morgan stared into the fire, seeing not the flames but the past. "Raid on our homestead in Missouri. Bushwhackers during the war. They wanted horses, food. She hid me in the root cellar when she heard them coming, made me promise not to come out no matter what I heard." The crackling fire filled the silence that followed. "I kept that promise," Morgan finally continued, his voice hollow. "Even when I heard her screaming, even when the shots came. When I finally crawled out, they were gone. So was she." Nashota's small hand found his, her fingers wrapping around his calloused palm. "You lived." That was her wish. Such wisdom from one so young. Morgan looked down at their joined hands, his large and weathered, hers small and smooth. 2 survivors bound by loss and the simple words of those who had loved them. "Yes," he whispered. I lived. Spring came to Texas with violent beauty. Thunderstorms that shook the foundations of the cabin and turned the ground to mud, followed by explosions of wildflowers across the plains. Nashota had settled into life at the ranch, helping Morgan with daily chores and slowly revealing more of herself. She'd taught him words in Apache, and he'd taught her to ride his gentlest mare. Their quiet routine was disrupted one April afternoon when Morgan spotted riders approaching, 3 men from town, led by Sheriff Wallace. "Stay inside," Morgan told Nashota, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle propped by the door. "Don't come out until I call for you." She nodded, disappearing into the shadows of the cabin as Morgan stepped onto the porch, forcing his expression into one of casual indifference. "Sheriff," he acknowledged as the men reined in their horses. "Something I can help you with?" Wallace dismounted, spitting a stream of tobacco juice onto Morgan's dirt yard. "Came about that Indian girl you've been keeping, Caldwell. Army's sending a detachment through next week, taking any strays to the reservation school up north." Morgan's jaw tightened. "Don't know what you're talking about, Sheriff." One of the other riders, a man named Hobbs who ran the general store, laughed harshly. "Don't play dumb, Caldwell. Half the town knows you've got an Apache brat living here. Folks are talking." "Let them talk," Morgan replied evenly. Sheriff Wallace stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Listen here. I've left you alone these past years because you keep to yourself. But harboring an Indian, especially with the raids up north, that's asking for trouble." "She's a child," Morgan said, his voice deadly quiet. "Not even 8 years old." "She's Apache," the third rider interjected. Morgan recognized him as Preston, a new settler whose cattle had disappeared last month. "Those savages murdered the Collins family just 50 miles north, took their scalps, burned their baby alive." Morgan's hand tightened on his rifle. "This child has done nothing." "Don't matter," Wallace said, his hand resting casually on his holstered pistol. "Army's orders are to round up all natives, hostile or not. Put 'em where they belong." "And where's that, Sheriff?" "Away from decent folk." The air between them crackled with tension. Morgan knew he was outnumbered, but these men had no legal right to take Nashota, not yet, anyway. "I appreciate your concern," Morgan said carefully. "But there's no child here, just me and my horses." Wallace's eyes narrowed. "We could search the place." "You could try." Morgan shifted his rifle slightly, not raising it, but making its presence known. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Wallace stepped back, a tight smile stretching across his weather-beaten face. "Have it your way, Caldwell. But when the army comes through, they won't be asking nice." He mounted his horse. "Might want to think about which side you're on in this territory." Morgan watched them ride away, his heart pounding against his ribs. When they were just specks on the horizon, he returned inside to find Nashota exactly where he'd left her, pressed against the wall near the fireplace. "They want to take me away," she said, not a question but a statement. Morgan knelt before her. "I won't let them." "You will fight them?" Her dark eyes studied him, neither hopeful nor fearful. "Just assessing." "If I have to," Morgan replied honestly. "But I'm hoping it won't come to that." That night, after Nashota had fallen asleep, Morgan sat at his rough-hewn table cleaning his rifle by lamplight. His mind raced through options, none of them good. He could try to reach the Mexican border. It was less than 100 miles south. But traveling with a child, especially one who looked Apache, would draw attention. He could try to find her people, but the free Apache bands were being hunted relentlessly now, pushed further into the mountains or onto reservations. And even if he found them, there was no guarantee they would accept a half-white child or Morgan himself. As dawn approached, Morgan came to a decision. They would leave, not south toward Mexico or west toward the remaining Apache territories, but east, toward the thickly wooded areas of East Texas, where a man and a child might disappear among the pines. He was awakened from a brief, troubled sleep by the sound of hoofbeats, a single rider approaching at speed. Morgan grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. The rising sun silhouetted a familiar figure, Jim Becker, a half-Mexican rancher whose property bordered Morgan's to the north. "Caldwell," Becker called, reining in his lathered horse. "You've got trouble coming." Morgan stepped onto the porch, Nashota appearing like a shadow behind him. "What kind of trouble?" "Army patrol," Becker said, removing his hat to wipe sweat from his brow. "Camped at my place last night. Officer was asking about an Apache girl, said they had orders to collect any Indian children for the government school. Morgan's blood ran cold. When are they heading this way? They're already coming. I rode ahead to warn you. Becker glanced at Nashota, then back to Morgan. They've got no legal right to take her if she's in your care. But since when has that stopped them? How many? 6. Lieutenant and 5 troopers. Becker replaced his hat. I told them I hadn't seen any Indian children, but they're checking every homestead between here and town. Morgan nodded his thanks. I owe you, Jim. Becker shook his head. My grandmother was Comanche. I know what those schools do. He looked at Nashota again. There's an old line shack on the south edge of my property. If you need somewhere to lie low for a spell, it's yours. After Becker rode off, Morgan turned to Nashota. Pack what you can carry. We're leaving. She nodded once and disappeared inside. Morgan saddled 2 horses, his bay gelding and the gentle mare Nashota had learned to ride. He packed provisions, ammunition, and the wooden box containing his few treasures. As they prepared to leave, Nashota paused at the cabin door, looking back at the only home she'd known since losing her mother. Will we return? She asked. Morgan couldn't lie to her. I don't know. She nodded, accepting this as she had accepted all the harsh truths of her young life. Then I am ready. They rode south, keeping to the low ground where the mesquite and scrub oak provided cover. Morgan's plan was to reach Becker's line shack by nightfall, rest the horses, then continue east before dawn. If they pushed hard, they could reach the Sabine River in 4 days. They had covered perhaps 5 miles when Morgan heard it, the distant sound of hoofbeats, multiple riders moving fast. He reined in, motioning for Nashota to do the same. Into those trees, he whispered, pointing to a dense thicket of mesquite. Stay low. They dismounted, leading their horses into the cover of the trees. Through gaps in the foliage, Morgan could see 6 riders in the distinctive blue uniforms of the U.S. cavalry, moving at a trot along the trail that led to his ranch. They will find our tracks, Nashota whispered. She was right. The ground was still soft from recent rains, and the prints of their horses would be clear to any competent tracker. Morgan made a swift decision. We need to split up, he said, reaching into his saddlebag for the map he'd brought. See this creek? It runs south to the river. Follow it. The water will hide your tracks. Nashota's eyes widened. You are sending me away? No, Morgan said firmly. I'm going to lead them away from you. Then I'll circle back and meet you here. He pointed to a spot on the map where the creek joined a larger river. Wait for me there. If I'm not there by tomorrow sunset, keep going east. Fear flickered across her face, the first real fear he'd seen from her. What if they catch you? Morgan touched the worn letter in his pocket, the one from Sarah, the one that had kept him living when all he'd wanted was to die. Then he touched the second letter, the one that had brought Nashota to him. They won't, he promised. I was a scout during the war. I know how to disappear. He hesitated, then removed Sarah's letter from his pocket. Take this, for luck. Nashota accepted it with solemn reverence. I will guard it with my life. No, Morgan corrected gently. Guard your life instead. That's what matters. He helped her mount the mare. Follow the creek, make no fires, I'll find you. As Nashota rode away, Morgan watched her small figure disappear among the trees. Then he mounted his gelding and rode in the opposite direction, making sure to leave clear tracks heading west, away from Nashota, away from their planned route east. The soldiers would follow him, and Morgan would make sure they never got close to finding what he now realized was more precious to him than his own life, the child who had somehow, against all odds, given him a reason to live again. Lieutenant James Harper had been tracking Indians for 3 years, ever since graduating from West Point and being assigned to the Texas frontier. He considered himself an expert, though the Apache scouts attached to his unit might have disagreed. What he lacked in true tracking skill, however, he made up for in determination. Track split here, sir, Sergeant Miller reported, pointing to where the trail divided. 1 rider headed west, 1 south. Harper studied the ground, noting the different hoof prints. The smaller horse went south. That'll be the girl. He divided his men. Miller, take Davis and Jenkins. Follow the southern track. Reynolds, Williams, you're with me heading west. That'll be Caldwell. Morgan, hidden in a stand of oak half a mile away, watched through his field glass as the soldiers separated. 3 heading toward Nashota, 3 toward the false trail he'd laid. He'd anticipated this possibility, leaving clear tracks west before doubling back on rocky ground where his horse's hooves left minimal imprints. His jaw tightened as he watched the 3 soldiers head south. They were moving faster than he'd hoped, the sergeant among them clearly an experienced tracker. Morgan mounted his gelding, keeping to the high ground as he paralleled their path. He needed to intercept them before they got close to the creek where Nashota would be traveling. Nashota had done exactly as Morgan instructed, guiding her mare into the shallow creek and following its winding course southward. The water was cold, splashing up to her knees as the horse picked its way carefully along the rocky creek bed. She kept her eyes scanning the banks, looking for any sign of pursuit. When she heard hoofbeats approaching from the north, Nashota guided her horse into a dense stand of cottonwoods that overhung the creek. She dismounted, leading the mare deeper into the trees, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it might give away her position. Through the leaves, she could see 3 soldiers reining in at the creek's edge, examining the ground. The sergeant dismounted, studying the muddy bank. "Creek's been disturbed," he called to the others. "Recent. Could be our quarry. Spread out," he ordered. "Check both banks for where they might have exited the water." Nashota pressed herself against her horse, one hand covering its muzzle to keep it quiet, the other clutching Morgan's letter in her pocket. The mare shifted nervously, sensing her fear. A twig snapped nearby. One of the soldiers was approaching her hiding place. Nashota could see him through the leaves, rifle in hand, not 20 feet away. One more step, and he would spot her. The crack of a rifle shot shattered the silence. The soldier spun around as his companions shouted in alarm. 2 more shots rang out from somewhere to the north. "Under fire!" the sergeant yelled. "Take cover!" The soldiers scrambled for protection, returning fire toward the unseen attacker. Nashota recognized the pattern of shots, 3 quick, then silence, then 2 more from a different position. Morgan was making them think they faced multiple shooters. In the confusion, she led her horse deeper into the trees, putting distance between herself and the soldiers. When she reached the far side of the cottonwood stand, she mounted and urged the mare into a gallop, heading south along the creek bank. Behind her, the sound of gunfire continued, then gradually faded as she put distance between herself and the skirmish. Nashota rode hard, trusting Morgan to find her, praying to the spirits her mother had taught her about that he would survive. Morgan had fired just enough shots to create confusion, never aiming to hit the soldiers, but to make them believe they were surrounded. As they took defensive positions, he circled around, staying hidden in the trees. His goal wasn't to fight, it was to delay, to give Nashota time to escape. When he judged she'd had sufficient head start, Morgan fired one final shot into the air, then mounted and rode east, keeping to rocky ground and dry creek beds where tracking would be difficult. The rendezvous point Morgan had chosen was a bend in the river where a massive fallen oak created a natural shelter. He arrived as dusk was falling, relieved to find no sign that the soldiers had passed this way. But there was also no sign of Nashota. Morgan unsaddled his exhausted horse, setting up a small camp hidden beneath the oak's massive root system. He built no fire, eating jerky and hardtack in darkness, straining his ears for any sound of approach. Hours passed. The moon rose, casting silver light across the river. Still no Nashota. Morgan fought against the growing fear in his chest. Had the soldiers found her despite his diversion? Had she been injured or lost? A soft sound caught his attention, the gentle splash of hooves in water. Morgan drew his pistol, moving quietly to the edge of his shelter. A small figure on horseback emerged from the shadows upstream, leading the mare carefully along the river's edge. Morgan's heart leapt. "Nashota," he called softly. She turned toward his voice, then urged her horse forward. When she reached him, she practically fell into his arms, her small body trembling with exhaustion and relief. "I thought they had caught you," she whispered against his chest. "I told you I'd find you," Morgan said, his voice rough with emotion. "I keep my promises." That night, as Nashota slept beneath his coat, Morgan kept watch, listening for pursuit that never came. By dawn, he was certain they'd lost the soldiers. They could continue east now, toward the pine forest where they might start anew. "Where will we go?" Nashota asked as they saddled the horses in the gray light of dawn. Morgan considered the question. "I have a cousin in Louisiana. Has a small farm near the Sabine River. We could stay there until we figure out something permanent." "And then?" Morgan looked down at her upturned face. This child who had entered his life with nothing but a worn blanket and a note, who had somehow awakened something in him he'd thought long dead. "Then we make a home," he said simply. "Together." Nashota nodded, a small smile touching her lips for the first time since he'd found her shivering in the snow. "I would like that." As they rode east, the rising sun at their backs, Morgan thought about the words that had brought them together. "I was loved once, too." Words written by two different women, separated by time and circumstance, both hoping their love would somehow protect those they were leaving behind. And perhaps it had, for here they were, Morgan and Nashota, two broken souls finding in each other what they had lost. Not a replacement for what was gone, but something new. Something that might, with time and care, heal the wounds they both carried. "We'll be all right," Morgan said, more to himself than to Nashota. She looked back at him, her eyes clear and steady. "Yes, we will." The Texas plains stretched behind them, and before them lay an uncertain future. But between them now was something neither had expected to find again. Trust, hope, the beginning of love. And for now, that was enough. Thank you so much for joining us on this heartfelt journey through the winter plains of Texas. If this story moved you even a little, we invite you to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Your support truly means the world to us and helps keep us motivated to share more stories of love, redemption, and hope. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for being here. And remember, at the end of this video, you'll find another story suggestion from our channel. Click and be surprised by another emotional tale that may just touch your soul.